Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel and spending some time with me today. We are going to be talking about fishing floating worms in the month of November. November, at the time of filming, just a couple weeks away. A lot of people have never even fished or heard about fishing a floating worm in November, but guys, I can assure you, you get the right set of conditions, and this is going to be some of the funnest fishing you'll ever have all year long. So we're going to dive into that in today's video. Also, guys, quick invitation. I'd just like to invite everybody to swing by Tackle Warehouse and check out my new Blaukat throwback jig from Cumberland Pro Lures that I helped design with them. These are hand-tied living rubber jigs. I'm biased, but I can promise you, I think this is the finest jig on the market you can ever buy. I'll put my Cumberland Pro Lures Tackle Warehouse link in the description. And I would suggest for fall time of year, this is probably one of my favorites, is the brown with the green chunk on it, or brown with orange, but you can't go wrong with the brown and green anytime you have water visibility over about 2 feet or so. Really appreciate that. Okay guys, floating worms in the month of November. Most people think of a floating worm as a springtime lure, and that's when they are great. You can't, nobody can argue with the fact they work really good then. There's also a window of time in the fall time of year where I like to fish these, and actually, when I look back at my tournament successes, I've had more success on a floating worm in the fall time than I have in the springtime. I've almost won several big tournaments. I've made a lot of money in October and November fishing a floating worm, and it just doesn't get fished. But here's the thing about it. It's all about water temperature. Now, in the springtime of the year, the floating worm is always better when the water temperature is in the 60s. And it's the same thing in the fall time of the year. When the water temperatures are in the 60s, that is when the floating worm starts to work again. It's like the metabolism of the fish and how they're positioned in shallow water. It's the same as it is in the springtime of the year. Now, depending upon what part of the country you live in, you're going to have some 60 type degree water in November. I mean, we do here. It's like, November, October, you do have 60 degree water. And you can also catch them down into about 55, 56 degree water. It doesn't have to be 60, but right around that 60, 65 degree mark is really good with it. Okay, here's what you want to do, guys. 2 different colors. These are my favorites. This is the Zoom Trick Worm in either some type of banana or chartreuse like this, or bubblegum. These are my 2 favorite colors. And regardless of the water clarity this works in any water clarity between about 2 foot or greater. Doesn't really matter. It's like I catch them on this color if the water's 2 foot of visibility or 10 foot of visibility, based upon how I'm going to show you guys to fish it. So real quick here, before I talk about where to fish it, let's talk a little bit about rigging it. You want to rig it, guys, with a straight shank hook. I use a straight shank Gamakatsu worm hook, and just thread it all the way through about halfway. I don't use an offset or an EWG like a lot of people. I use an exposed hook. So thread that worm through about like that. Leave it just a little bit of a crook in it. You leave a little bit of a crook in it. It gives the worm has a lot better action through the water than if it's just straight. So I rig it, that's how I rig it. And I usually put like a barrel swivel about 1 foot above it so it doesn't twist my line. Throw it on a spinning rod all the time. So that's how you set it up. And just work it with just gentle twitches like that, just like that. Just try to get it, just walking through the water. But the main thing is once you get the bait set up and you get all your equipment going on it, is where you want to fish it at. Now, what you want to look for, my favorite type of area is any type of a major creek arm that it can have, coves within the creek arm or whatever, but just get back in a couple of the major creek arms. First thing I like to do is look for any shallow wood cover. If you have a lay down tree in the water, a stump in the water, a lay down log, a piling, a dock, anything that's made out of wood in less than 5 foot of water, take this floating worm, guys, and throw it right around the edge of that cover, just like you would throwing a spinner bait or a crankbait next to the edge of a lay down tree. And guys, if there's one in there and that water temperature's in the 60s, they will come out and hammer this thing. Now, I work it down at a lot of different depths based upon the visibility of the water. Most of the time, I like to keep it in sight. In fact, 90% of the time, but I keep it in sight where it's barely in sight based upon the water clarity. Now, this is the key element to it. So if you have about 2 foot of visibility, you want to keep that bait down to where you can see the worm down in about that foot of water or so. But if you're fishing water visibility that's clear, like 5 or 6 foot of visibility, throw it out there and let it sink down for 3 or 4 feet and start working it through that mid-depth water column. It's like in the fall time of the year, you're pulling those fish not only horizontally, from cover, but off the bottom too. And they're a lot more apt to come up on it if the bait's a little bit deeper in the water. So that's a big trick that I have found out in the fall time. A lot of people fish a floating worm right at the surface. They keep it close to the surface. And you can catch them doing that sometimes, especially like if it's a little bit warmer or cloudy or rainy, that can work. But some of the best success that I've had, let me give you a prime example. Let's say you pull up and you've got a lay down tree off of a bank and the water visibility is 3 or 4 feet. I'll throw that floating worm down the edge of that tree and I'll let it sink down, probably, 2 or 3 feet, and I'll start slowly working that bait down. And I want to keep it just deep enough where I can just see it. Now, sometimes that's 2 feet, sometimes that's 3 feet, sometimes it can be as deep as 4 feet. And all of a sudden you'll just see the bait just disappear out of that clear water a lot of times. But main thing, guys, is just throw it anywhere. If you're fishing in the fall time in November and you're catching them on whatever bait you're using that's a moving type bait, topwater lure, crankbait, spinnerbait, chatterbait, and you're throwing to something, just try a floating worm. It's a subtle bait, doesn't make any noise. The fish don't see it a lot, and those good ones will bite it. It's a good way to catch quality fish that time of year. So hope it helps out. We'll talk later.